My stepdad passed away and left everything to me, and I almost agreed to split it all with my mom and half-siblings because I felt bad for them until my stepdad's sister sent me an email explaining everything. So I blocked my family after finding out the truth about them, and now they're blowing up my phone because they're going to end up completely broke and homeless now. 28 male. I just recently cut my entire family out of my life, so I'm kind of out of sorts right now, and I'm not sure of anything that I'm doing. Not even a decision that I've made recently, and I'm here to ask for advice or whatever. Recently, about 2 weeks back, my stepdad passed away from stomach cancer. It all happened very quickly, and just a year ago it had been detected, and soon enough, before we could even process anything, we were told that the cancer had metastasized. And, of course, he underwent treatment for a while, and it seemed like he was going to get better. But, unfortunately, he didn't, and we lost him. David was not my biological father, but he was as good as since he had met my mom when I was just 4 years old. And after that, the two of them had pretty much raised me together alongside my half-siblings Kevin, 22 male, and Louise, 20 female. I had never known my biological father. He had walked out on my mom before I was even born, and after that they didn't have anything to do with each other. So I never thought of him as anything apart from my dad, and we had a happy family. So I have no idea what really went wrong. For context, my mom cheated on him, but I'll get to the details later. Before getting into that, I want to talk about David's business since that's also relevant. So David runs a catering business with his older sister, my Aunt Ruth. Now naturally after the cancer, he couldn't exactly go to work, but in spite of that, Ruth would send him his salary every month without fail, even though he was not even there. And let me just tell you that this is a catering business that their father, my grandpa, had started. So it's been around for a while. People know about their business and trust them. So it might not be millionaire material, but their business still does extremely well. And David has always had a sizable income. My mom used to work as well, but then after my youngest sibling was born, she quit her job and became a stay-at-home mom. I don't know if she has any savings or not, but I know for a fact that Kevin and Louise don't have any money of their own. I'm older than them, so obviously I've been working for a while and I have my savings, so even without David's inheritance, I can get by. However, Louise is still in college and has been depending on David to cover her expenses. And Kevin had just graduated a couple of months ago, so he doesn't have a job yet and is kind of in the middle. And he never worked while he was in college either, so I know that neither of these two have a dime to their name. So that's why when I learned that David had left everything to me, it came as a shock because I knew that everybody else had been financially dependent on him, whereas I had been working and didn't really need his inheritance as much as everybody else did. His decision didn't make any sense to me, but apparently his lawyer told me that that's what he had wanted. The lawyer got in touch with us after the funeral when we were told about what David had said in his will. Everybody agreed that it had to be a mistake, but it wasn't, and all of a sudden I started feeling very uneasy. I had no idea why David had done something like this, and on top of that, I could tell that my mom and my siblings were also very unhappy about this turn of events, even though they tried their best not to let it show. I didn't want to seem greedy, so I promised them that they wouldn't have to worry about money and that I would get in touch with a lawyer and split my inheritance with them. I specifically mentioned that I would do it with a lawyer and get paperwork involved, so I wouldn't be able to go back on my word, because even though I knew they trusted me, I didn't want to mess around with stuff like this. I was already pretty uncomfortable. I didn't want to make the situation even more awkward. Thankfully, after I made that promise, my mom and my siblings were very relieved, and we did not bring it up because it was just an awkward topic that we didn't have the answers to. This was almost 5 days ago, and then I recently went over to meet Aunt Ruth for dinner like I sometimes do, and I told her about my decision. I could tell that she was very uncomfortable and that she wanted to say something to me, but she didn't say anything at the dinner itself. Instead, I received an email from her the next morning where she explained everything, and now all of a sudden it all makes sense. You guys already know that my mom had been cheating on David, but what's worse was that she had somehow gotten David and Louise to cover up for her, and they had been doing that diligently for the past 2 years. Even more damning is the fact that she hadn't even been cheating with some random guy she hooked up with. She had been cheating on David with my dad of all people. Aunt Ruth put it all in an email because she told me that she didn't know how to say it to my face, but apparently David had known about this for the past couple of months. He didn't want to bring it up and confront my mom or the kids about it because she knew that he didn't have a lot of time, so he didn't want to put himself and his family through all that unnecessary drama while he was around. I guess I can sort of understand where he was coming from, but even then it must not have been easy for him to live with this knowledge and pretend like everything was fine. But somehow, he did it. Or maybe he did confront my mom about it, and she's just never spoken about it. I don't know. Anything could have happened, but the bottom line was that he had left everything to me for a reason. And after reading that email, I had no idea how to react. So I thought about it for hours until I finally decided I was going to have to block my family for now, because there was no way I could know something like this and pretend that everything was fine. Obviously that also meant that I was not going to be giving away any inheritance because right now I just couldn't be sure of anything. When I blocked them, nothing really happened for the first 2 days, but then yesterday, I guess they finally realized that I had cut them off and they decided to confront me about it. They marched down to my house, all 3 of them, and when I refused to let them in, they told me that the least I could do was at least offer them an explanation for my behavior because otherwise they would just be forced to assume that this was happening because of the whole thing with the inheritance. And they did not want to think that I was some greedy slimeball who wanted to keep everything to myself. I didn't open the door, but all I said was that I knew about the affair. I couldn't even bring myself to say the entire thing because it hurt a lot. It had the desired effect though. All 3 of them started talking at once. It took a couple of minutes for them to calm down, but I guess that I might have hit a nerve because they reacted very guiltily. Some parts of the story do line up, like from whatever Aunt Ruth told me. I knew that David had come across a couple of very incriminating texts on my mom's laptop from a group chat that she had with the kids. He had been using it to watch some show because his own laptop was acting up, and that's when he got bored and started snooping through her chats just for fun, which is how he found it. When he discovered that group, he started reading the texts and that was it. This part of the story is something that both Aunt Ruth and my mom can agree upon, but the rest is all a mess right now. Unfortunately, even though David did see those conversations, he didn't get the chance to send those screenshots to anyone, not even himself, because he was reading through them. My mom decided to enter the room, and when she caught him snooping through her messages, she got mad at him and took her laptop back. David did not say anything about it, but both of them knew what he had seen, and my mom said that she knew that this was going to come up sooner or later. Now, according to Aunt Ruth, she told me that they had seen those messages and read everything, so he knew that my mom had been seeing my dad behind his back for 2 years or maybe even longer. In the messages that he had been reading, the kids had said that they needed her to increase their allowance even more because they were sick of lying to their father and covering up for her so frequently. They had been having an argument of sorts in the conversation that David had, but it had been enough for him to realize what was going on. Basically, my mom was bribing Kevin and Louise to keep their mouths shut, and they were trying to blackmail her into increasing the amount. It had come as a shock to David, but when he returned the laptop to my mom, he did not mention it. My aunt told me that David was not sure whether my mom knew that he had seen those messages or not because as soon as she had walked into the room, he had tried to minimize whatever he was looking at, so there was a good chance that by the time she took the laptop back, the screen was probably just on the general list of chats that she had and not that particular group that she had with the kids. It was also equally possible that he might not have successfully minimized that screen, and when he returned the laptop to her, she probably saw that he had opened the group. Either way, regardless of what had happened, neither of them had brought up anything about it and there was no confrontation. That's what Aunt Ruth says, but when my mom showed up, she had a completely different version of things. She told me that she had seen that my dad had seen some messages that had been exchanged between her and the kids, but it was nothing like he had imagined it to be. She said that David had been hopping up on pain meds when he saw those messages and he made something out of it for no reason, and she claimed that there was a perfectly innocent explanation for whatever he had been so upset about. In my mom's version of things, there had been a confrontation and she had managed to clear everything up with David, but she had been afraid that he was probably still suspicious of her. Apparently, he had seen some messages, but he muddled them all up in his head and started believing random stuff that he himself had made up because of his overactive imagination. She told me that she had asked the kids to keep a secret and it had been a playful exchange at first. She was just joking with them and asking them not to tell David about some surprise party that she had been planning for him on his birthday. That checks out because according to the dates that both Aunt Ruth and my mom have told me, this incident had taken place just 2 weeks before David's birthday and he did have a surprise party. So apparently, that's what the secret was that my mom was asking Kevin and Louise to keep. And then in a separate conversation after that, the 2 kids had asked her to increase their allowances because they were running low on money. My mom claims that David read these separate conversations, got confused because of his altered state of mind due to the pain meds, and immediately started accusing her of cheating, and for some reason he believed that she had been cheating on him with my dad. She told me that she had managed to calm him down that day itself and somehow gotten him to believe that nothing of the sort was happening. But even afterward, she had noticed that he had been acting quite off occasionally, even though he never brought this up again, and told her that he believed her and asked her to forgive him. So I guess you guys can see my dilemma here because I've been told very conflicting versions of the same story and I really don't know who to believe. On one hand, it is true that it would be very unlikely and very disgusting for my mother to go back to my dad because I remember her telling me exactly how much she hated him after their breakup. I think I was in my teens back then, but I still remember that conversation vividly. I know that she loathes him and I'm not sure, but I think I also heard her mention at some point that he's married with 3 kids now, just a few years back. Also, I spent a lot of time with David in his last few days, and there was no indication that there was anything wrong between him and the rest of the family. All of us seemed perfectly happy, so it's very hard to believe that there had been any cheating or bad blood. But then it also seems very unlikely that Aunt Ruth would just invent a story like this, especially something so horrible. And of course, most importantly, there is the fact that David left everything to me. He was fond of me and he loved me. I know that, but there was never any indication that he was more fond of me than any of his other kids or even my mother. He seemed to love us all equally, so I really don't know what to do about this problem at hand and who to trust. My aunt has been very dignified about the whole situation. She told me that she can understand how difficult it must be for me to come to a conclusion, especially without any proof. She has pretty much left me to my own devices because in spite of David's strict instructions that I should never find out about any of this, she did tell me these things, but that was the most that she could do for me to prevent me from giving up my inheritance to people who did not deserve it. My mom and siblings, however, have not stayed out of the way and have constantly been telling me that they are telling me the truth and that I need to trust them because right now I'm the only person they can count on. It would seem suspicious under ordinary circumstances, but unfortunately I know that if I don't give them the benefit of the doubt, they'll end up broke and homeless. I don't know if my mom has any savings, but they can't be a lot for sure. As for my siblings, I already explained that Kevin and Louise don't really have any money. On top of that, the inheritance also included the house that they stay in, so they're completely at my mercy right now. If I don't choose to believe them, they'll end up losing everything, and that's a huge deal. That should explain why I'm in such a horrible situation, because I honestly don't know who to believe anymore. I feel like a jerk for not being able to fully trust my mom and my siblings, and I feel even worse because I'm planning on asking them to somehow prove to me that they're being honest before I make any decision about the inheritance. I don't know how they do it. I just need some evidence to trust them, but I feel like a jerk even asking for it because it's not like I'm the only person who has lost David. They've been through a lot as well, but I feel like I need this. So I guess what I'm trying to ask is WIBTA, if I ask my mom and my half-siblings to prove that my mom hadn't been cheating on my stepdad before I split my inheritance with them. Edit. Hey, I know a lot of people have a lot of suggestions, but honestly, if there was any way to verify either story, I really would have done it by now because it's been driving me crazy as well. Unfortunately, either one of them could be telling me the truth and there is just no way to find out. Even if I tell my mom or Kevin or Louise to bring me their laptops and phones or whatever, it would be pretty pointless because I know that they can just wipe away anything that might be even slightly incriminating. Everyone knows how easy it is to manipulate chats by just deleting some messages here and there. In fact, they have even sent me a couple of screenshots from the day of this incident, and apparently there really had been a discussion about allowances right after a reference to some secret. But then again, they might have deleted earlier messages or later ones, and I could be easily duped if I decided to believe those screenshots. So going through their chats is not going to do me any good at this point. I don't know how, but they just have to come up with something else, something more tangible and not as easy to manipulate as screenshots or chats. That's the only way out that I can think of for now. Update 1. 4 hours after my post, I decided I was going to tell my mom, Kevin and Louise, that they're going to have to prove somehow that they were telling me the truth because right now, they need my help the most. They need me to split the inheritance with them. Aunt Ruth doesn't stand to gain anything from lying to me. In fact, she actually stands to lose a lot. Because right now my mom and my half-siblings are pretty upset with her because they think that she's lying about everything and speaking to her. I'm not sure about Mom, but I know that Aunt Ruth loves Kevin and Louise and she's already lost them, but she is still sticking to her story. Additionally, if I decide to believe my mom's version over her, then she might end up losing me as well. So I've thought about it, and realistically speaking, there is no good reason why Aunt Ruth would lie to me about something like this, and that's why I've been leaning towards believing her to be very honest. Anyway, when I told my mom that she somehow needed to prove that she was telling me the truth, she instantly offered to show me all the messages on her phone, and even Kevin and Louise did the same. But like I've already said, messages and stuff can be manipulated and conversations can just be deleted. I'm pretty sure that if they actually had something to hide, they'd probably wiped it all by now. So there's no point in going through their phones, and I told them the same. I don't know what they're going to do, but I told them that phones and laptops are just not going to cut it. They're going to have to come up with something that's going to be irrefutable proof of them telling the truth. And when I told them this, of course they were outraged and they were telling me that I was being unreasonable, but I can't help it. I have very serious reasons to doubt their honesty, and in any case, if I'm going to be splitting my inheritance with someone, I want to make sure that they have been respectful towards David. I don't think that's too much to ask for, and I'm going to be sticking to my demands, that's for sure. Update 2. So a few days have passed since my last interaction with my mom and my siblings, and things haven't exactly been going well. All three of them are very upset with me. They think that I'm being unreasonable, and they believe there is no feasible option for them here right now because there's really no way they can prove that they were telling me the truth. But I don't care about that. If they want the inheritance, they're going to have to think of something, because the more that I think about it, the less likely it seems that Aunt Ruth had been lying about anything. Initially, I have to admit that I was willing to give my family the benefit of the doubt because honestly they are my family and that was very important to me. My mom and my siblings have always had a good relationship with me and I love them. I still do. So it was very difficult for me to even entertain the idea that they might have done something like this and been so cruel to David. There was obviously the initial shock of learning these things. But now that I think about it with a clearer head, I have to admit that several things about their story don't add up. Like for example, if my mother had really cleared everything up with David on the day of the incident where he found out about the group text and stuff and like she says, and if he forgave her, then why would he leave everything to me and nothing to them? I thought about it from several different angles and I just can't come up with a reasonable conclusion. I also refuse to believe that David had been hopped up on pain meds and that's why he was confused about what he was reading in the chats that he saw. I've seen him on pain meds and I can acknowledge that he seems to be a bit dazed, but the kind of confusion that my mom was talking about has never happened to him, at least not in my presence. Most importantly, I've kept in touch with Aunt Ruth for the past couple of days, and she has told me that even after finding out what was going on behind his back, David never let on that he knew these things because he didn't want any drama, but afterwards, in the end, he had confided in her about it, and from then on, she had been very uneasy about my mom and the kids. She had tried her best to hide it, but even I had noticed that now that I think about it. So there are several signs pointing to the fact that maybe Aunt Ruth is telling me the truth, and at this point, I more or less believe her. It would really take a miracle for my mom and the siblings now to make me think otherwise, at least at this stage. Update 3. Hey. So it's been 1 week since my last update and for the past couple of days my mom and my siblings haven't exactly been texting me. For a while, they had been trying to reason with me, telling me that there was no way that they could prove that they were telling me the truth and I would just have to take their word for it. But I did not respond to them, so eventually, I guess they just gave up. The last message that my mom sent me was just her telling me that so far she has been relying on her own savings, but they have been very meager, and because of the expenditure, they're dwindling right now. So I need to come to a decision quickly and I can't expect them to continue waiting for me to believe them. It was clear that she was very frustrated with the situation right now, but I really couldn't help it. After what Aunt Ruth told me, I don't think that I can just trust them like that. I don't care if I'm being a heartless person. All the signs point towards them lying to me about David and the affair. And as it is disheartening as it is, I don't think it's fair for them to receive any part of the inheritance if they can't even prove that they haven't been lying. At the end of the day, if it's just going to be their word against Aunt Ruth, I'm sorry, but I'm inclined to believe my aunt because she has no reason to lie to me. She doesn't stand to get anything from this, but they do. Any reasonable person in my place could do the exact same thing. At least I'm still giving them the benefit of the doubt, which I don't think other people might have done. But that's only because I've been very emotionally distraught for the past couple of weeks since I've lost somebody very close to me. The only reason I haven't blocked them yet is because I'm still hoping for a miracle against all reason, since it would hurt me more than them to cut them out of my life entirely because of what they've done to David. I can't even imagine what David might have gone through, and I really hope that his soul is at peace right now because given the situation of our family, I don't think he was peaceful in his last few days. Whichever version of the story is true, it doesn't matter because I know that David was hurt either way. He spent his entire life taking care of his family and to find out that his family had stabbed him in the back at the end. I can't imagine what that must have felt like. Given those circumstances, I think proof of truth is the very least I can ask from my mom and siblings. Update 4. The last message I received from my mother was about 2 weeks ago. And, again, today, I received a phone call from her early in the morning. When I did not respond, she decided to show up at my house after work. Once again, it wasn't just her. Kevin and Louise also showed up. And this time, they were not pleading with me like the last time, but they were very upset. When I refused to open the door to them once again, they started cursing at me and told me that they knew that I was only coming up with excuses to keep all the inheritance to myself and in reality, I couldn't care less about the truth. Obviously, that's not the case but they just needed something to yell at me about so I let it go and didn't even bother to defend myself. I knew what the reality of the situation was and by the way they were reacting, I was becoming even more sure that Aunt Ruth had been telling me the truth. So I was pretty glad that I had chosen not to believe them. And then my mom finally snapped and told me that she knew that my Aunt Ruth was misleading me just because we wanted to keep everything to ourselves and leave them homeless and broke. But she was going to make sure it didn't happen and warn me that I was going to hear from her lawyer pretty soon. I think I've made it pretty obvious that Aunt Ruth doesn't need anything from me. She has enough money on her own so that's pretty much the last thing on her mind. Anyway, after that, I became pretty sure that my mom had indeed been cheating on David with my biological father, and Kevin and Louise had been covering up for her. There is no other plausible explanation for any of this, and even though it's very upsetting to know, I've made my peace with the truth. Even if I had been giving them the benefit of the doubt until now, their behavior and threats today made me very sure which version of the story is true. So she can come after me with her lawyer. It hardly makes a difference to me because I know that I have the truth on my side. Besides, from what I'm guessing, I don't even think they'll have enough money to hire a lawyer. So they can do their worst. I'm ready for it. Until then, I'm just going to remember David being happy and keep him in my memories and try to honor him to the best of my abilities by living well. I know that he didn't want me to find out about the affair and stuff, but honestly, I'm glad that I did because it was necessary for me to know the truth about my family. I'm thankful that I have Aunt Ruth in my life. She's the only person right now who I can count on and who's keeping me sane, and I hope that in the future, I can start trying to heal from all of this.